about to begin. We want to welcome you to the Vampire and Devil Show. We want to welcome you to the Vampire and Devil Show. It's gonna be bloody fun. We're gonna kill everyone. Welcome to the Vampire and Devil Show. With lots of blood and lots of guts. Two horror fanatics and rock and roll nuts. Welcome to the Vampire and Devil Show.
I watch the Vampire and Devil podcast because it gives me that tickle in my funny bone.
Happy St. Patrick's Day, there, ghouls and goblins, spooks and creeps. We have things to discuss. There's little people running around. There's bigger people talking about it. And there's blood to be spilled. And curiosities to uncover. We are going to continue our next showdown of vampire versus devil. Oh, me? No. You. Thanks as always for checking us out, guys. We are super duper stoked to rock out with you guys, and it's going to be another great one. We're going to dive right into it. For St. Patrick's today, there was only one thing for us to discuss, and that is Leprechaun. Warwick Davis, a favorite of ours, you know, that is just a really cool cat. Such a long history of stuff that he's done, whether it be Willow, whether it be Star Wars, and whether it be things like Harry Potter. But considering that we're speaking of the horror community, we're going to keep this about Leprechaun. And so we pitted Leprechaun 1, the original, against Leprechaun 3.
Do you think you could kill a leprechaun?
That took place in Vegas.
Oh yeah, so yes, we wanted to do, give the old Biddy the Irish a little luck today, and we decided, what should we do it? And like you said, we were like, you know what, there's a lot of good movies about the Irish. There's a lot of good movies about St. Patrick's Day, but literally the only really good horror St. Patrick's Day movies has always been Leprechaun.
Yeah.
So we're like, which Leprechaun should we do? So we both decided which Leprechaun we would like better, and we wanted to go with the OG original Leprechaun, and like you said, the third Leprechaun, which in my opinion, those are the two best Leprechauns in the series.
Yes, 100%. I agree with you on that one. So let's start. We'll start right off with, of course, the first Leprechaun, that being your pick. And so let's talk a little bit about that. So it was Trimark's first movie that they did. And the funny thing, too, about that movie is like Trimark kind of wanted it to be more of like, I think it was a traditional, like, gore slasher style horror movie where the director was into things like Freddy Krueger and Nightmare on Elm Street and that type of like horror comedy aspect where he still wanted it to be considered a horror movie, but just liked that tongue-in-cheek aspect. So there was a lot of just little goofy, just fun things that, couldn't help but make you laugh in a movie that was supposed to be geared more towards fear.
Oh yeah. Like you said, yeah, it's definitely, you can definitely tell that this director had a love interest for like those type of movies. And like I said, a lot of people go, I've seen Leprechaun and I can't remember anything like that. Well, let me just jog your memory. Well, in the movie Leprechaun, he's talking to the Jennifer Aniston's character on the phone, and his hand comes out the phone, kind of like the tongue comes out the phone and Freddy Krueger. So it's like little bits and pieces of that kind of stuff. You can definitely tell, like very, very Chucky.
Yeah.
like with the comedy and stuff like that, the one-liners. And like I said, we'll talk a little bit more about the one-liners in Leprechaun 3. There was some good Leprechaun one-liners in this one, but I think the third one was the king of the one-liners. I think Warwick Davis got a lot more free range to give those one-liners. But the first one still had some good ones. He was doing a lot of the oh, don't mess with the leprechaun's gold, and then the one kill in the movie where he's jumping on him on a pogo stick, he's making some references and jokes, and yeah, like you could definitely tell like this movie was meant to be. I mean, it's about a killer leprechaun. You steal a leprechaun's gold, so you can't really take it too serious. But it's like in the realm of like comedy and horrors. This one had that bit of piece of comedy in it, but it was still more in the horror realm than the comedy realm.
For sure. I mean, the pogo kill is always been a great kill. I mean, basically just sternum crushing this guy to death by just jumping on him with a pogo stick. I mean, yeah, there's humor along with that because it's a pretty absurd way to kill somebody, but it's definitely a good one because I mean, yeah, he takes that fucker out. I mean, it's definitely a cool kill for sure. But the cast also is really interesting as well, not just for the cast of the movie, but even just like other like things that they were involved in. But I mean, the director Mark Jones also did Rumpelstiltskin, which I know is also a favorite of your own. But the movie came out in 1992. But it's just very cool. You already mentioned, Jennifer Aniston. We talked about, of course, Warwick Davis. And one of the other people that I love talking about is Mark Holton, because a lot of people, probably the common people, know him as Chubby from Teen Wolf with Michael J. Fox. But he, in my opinion, played an amazing John Wayne Gacy, and personally my favorite Gacy movie that's come out. And it's not like there's a huge arsenal of like Gacy movies, but there's a good collection of them. And I really loved his portrayal of John Wayne Gacy in that particular movie. But I just think Mark Holton is great, and his character Ozzy was hilarious.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah, it's like you said, him being in a lot of those movies. My personal movie always with him is always going to be Pee Wee's Big Adventure.
Of course.
Because I'm a huge Paul Rubens Pee Wee fan. So for me, like I don't know, he played such a great freaking nemesis towards Pee Wee in that movie. But yeah, yeah, like I said, yeah, the cast had a lot of good movies. Like I said, a lot of these good actors in this movie. Like I said, it was a very, for being a kind of a low budget movie, and a lot of these actors, you say their names now and they're big. At this time, they weren't really big. Like you said, Jennifer Aniston's in this movie, who literally like a year after this movie came out was when Friends came out. So this is like when she was pretty much an unknown actress at the time. She's done a couple little. I think this is her first like debut as like a theatrical debut. She's done a couple little TV movies and stuff like that. But yeah, and then apparently like we've talked about personally about a few times. I know she's kind of kept put this movie back in the back burner for a little while. She was
Yeah.
always about like her possibly hurting her career maybe. She kind of denied it for a while. Warwick Davis was like, yeah, you're in this movie, and then I think after all the other Leprechauns came out and there were more and more and they started getting that popularity. I think now she's kind of come back to the, oh yeah, yeah, I was in Leprechaun, but I was like, yeah, you didn't like it too much, at the time. But I mean, I get it. At the time you're doing this movie, hell yeah, you're a young starving actress and you'll be in any movie you can be on. Then all of a sudden you get a break to be in on probably one of the biggest TV shows that ever come out, Friends. And yeah, of course, when in maybe those first couple seasons of Friends where you weren't quite sure if it was going to be big or not, but then you know when Friends blew up, yeah, you kind of don't want to be like, hey, that's Jennifer Aniston. Let me go look and see what she's been in. Oh, she was in Leprechaun.
Yeah, it's kind of one of those things where I get it too. I totally agree with you, but I'll admit I don't understand it either because, and this is why. Leprechaun came out in 1992. Friends came out in 1993, which means she was cast, basically thrust into stardom practically immediately after Leprechaun, where the whole kind of stereotype pigeonhole like thing about being in horror movies is that typecast thing. Don't get me wrong, there's plenty of examples of that. You and I discussed it recently, I believe, either on a previous episode or just in a conversation recently about how you had like, you know, you had Herman Munster, you had Fred Gwynn, who I happen to be a huge fan of, where he's an amazing actor, a very established, like quality dramatic actor from Broadway to all that kind of stuff, not even being considered for great roles that he would easily slay because the casting people would be like, Herman Munster? Are you kidding me? Like, you want to cast that guy? That's the only reason why I never really understood her kind of like ghosting of the movie, when it appears simply to me that she wasn't affected by that, where casting directors are kind of going to know what you've been in, and it's really hard to get cast in something like Friends pretty much immediately, in my opinion, immediately right after a horror movie like that, and have the casting people not know about it.
Yeah.
It's one thing if Friends came out like, let's say 1997. So like a 5-year gap had gone by where she was maybe getting into more comedic stuff. Like, you know, she still did that, like Along Came Polly movie, where like, let's say she had done more movies like that, that kind of would play into the Friends type of comedy and drama things. And then, of course, be like, well, let's not put Leprechaun on the top of my resume as I'm applying for Friends. But they were like back to back. That's the reason I never really understood where she was coming from as far as ghosting the movie, that in my opinion didn't seem to affect her career in any way. But again, I'm not her. I didn't live that life at that time. So I could be completely wrong, where maybe she had to fight for Friends a little bit and it's really just not known to the common.
Yeah. Yeah, like I said. So I mean, but like I said, I mean, even either or, she wasn't winning any Academy Awards in this movie, regardless. Anyway, so so it's like, you know, I don't really honestly think it would hurt her career. But anyway, like I said, who knows? But getting back to the movie anyway, it's not about Jennifer Aniston. It's about Warwick Davis and the Leprechaun.
The Leprechaun.
The Leprechaun. Yeah, I mean, like I said, to me, I've been a huge Warwick Davis fan.
Yeah.
I mean, for years, and like I said, what better movie to strike fear in the hearts of people than doing a Leprechaun movie and scaring people, and like I love it because it's about, like, you know, it starts off with the old guy, the old couple. All of a sudden, he's telling his wife, "Hey, we don't have to worry about working anymore because he caught the leprechaun and now he's got his gold." And it's like everybody wants the gold, and it's like, yeah, like the one thing you should know is that you do not go after a leprechaun's gold, especially throughout the movie where he's just trying to kill you. I'll be like, here you go, here's your gold, thank you very much, sir, goodbye.
Right. And it's interesting with that kind of stuff. And so the movie basically plays out kind of exactly how you would expect, which is Warwick's, you know, murderous rampage to get back his gold and make everybody pay. And there's a lot of like subtleties, a little bit of leprechaun education that of course kind of comes with the territory. He's taking people out, kind of torturing them. You know, we have you know, Ken's character, who a lot of people know from like Summer School, which is always a movie that I always thought was actually always, you know, pretty cool. But we got Ken, you know, Oland's character as kind of the love interest, but then you also have Robert Gorman, who played Alex, the little boy, who is in like Don't Tell Mom the Babysitter's Dead, and also in like the Nanny with Hulk Hogan. But anyway, you have all these little like nuances. You've got the traps that the leprechaun sets, you know, like Ken's caught in a bear trap at one point. You know, you've got Alex like kind of trying to do the be brave, but he's a kid. All the way up to also as they're trying to get away from the leprechaun, trying to figure out a way to, you know, defeat him, leads up to one of the funnier scenarios, I guess you would call it, where they need to go meet O'Grady to learn about this guy and how to beat him. But they decide to send the one person who has no clue who he is or what he looks like, when there was
Yeah.
other people who knew exactly who to look for.
Yeah. That was there's two big huge things that I kind of questioned throughout this whole entire movie. That was one of them. Okay, they talk about the characters all talk about Grady living in the house, and how the house hasn't been lived in for like 10 years or something like that, and the stories of Grady. Oh yeah, he used to tell us stories all the time and all this other stuff like that. So we need help. So let's go give the one person who's been in the town for today. She just moved in the damn house today. Let's go have her go and find this McGrady guy, or find this dude she has no idea what he looks like, who he is, what he sounds like, did nothing about him. And then she just randomly knows how to get to the psychiatric hospital, like doesn't know anything about this town, but can figure out where it is.
Yeah.
So yeah, that part of the movie kind of made me really, really weird. And the other part of the movie that we've talked about before, what always made me laugh, is they're fighting off this leprechaun. The leprechaun is towards the climatic end, and they're fighting him. And the dude's got the shotgun, and he's shooting at leprechaun, and he's going back and forth through the room with a skateboard, and this guy's unloading the shotgun, missing the leprechaun every time. But every time he misses the leprechaun, nothing in the background gets shot.
Right.
Nothing breaks, nothing gets shattered, nothing goes into pieces from buckshot. And it's like, well, no wonder you can't kill this leprechaun. You're shooting blanks, young sir.
Seriously. It's like, oh, come on, man. At your age,
Yeah,
you should be painting the leprechaun white.
yeah. But yeah. Like I said, I mean, it's a lot of good camping fun in this movie. Camp fun, we love it. We love the kind of horrors that we like. It does kind of end kind of cool, where they find the 4-leaf clover, and they get him, and they finally get him, and he dies in the well. And then like all horror movies, they're not 100% sure whether or not they're going to be able to do sequels again. So they kind of leave you a teaser with him kind of coming out in his bones, and so it's like, yeah, it's like, are they gonna have another Leprechaun movie? I don't know, maybe.
Maybe we might have to talk about that. But it's also funny too, because there's also, going back just a tad, there are still, even in the final fight scenes, those little bits of comedy. Like when they're trying to get away from the leprechaun, and they're trying to stop Warwick from attacking them, so they just kept throwing a bunch of shoes at him, because leprechauns are obsessed with shoes and their quality, and that they always look good and are always clean and always shiny. So every time they would throw a shoe, he'd be like, fuck, gotta go clean this one, and like, I'm coming after you, god damn it, now clean that one, here I come, fuck, another shoe. It's like a dog that you keep throwing like tennis balls at, because he has to clean all the shoes. He can't have a dirty, raggedy looking shoe. And I always thought that was like really, really interesting and like really hilarious.
Oh yeah, I
So
love that part. Yeah, that part was funny. It's like, yeah, it's like that could have been the whole entire movie. You could have got away with him just by throwing a shoe every 5 seconds and let them do all that. It's like you could tell too, like he didn't really want to clean the shoes, but he was like, "Damn it, I gotta clean these shoes before I kill these people."
exactly. And even the death has got a certain amount of humor to it. It's literally, the youngest kid taking his gum, wrapping the 4-leaf clover around it, and like slingshotting it into Warwick's mouth, like happy St. Patrick's Day, motherfucker, or whatever it was he said before the motherfucker. And I was like, oh yep, there's typical 80s/90s slasher stuff. It's more than common to let the little kid be swearing.
Yeah, you gotta those kind of movies. You always gotta have the little kid say the F-bomb at least once.
Yeah, exactly, for
It's like,
sure.
go ahead, little kid. You can go ahead and say it now.
Yeah, it's all right. We'll pay for the therapy. So let's so before we continue on in the showdown, so let's talk a little bit about the obituaries for this particular movie. Devil, why don't you do the honors and starting it off with how you rank the kill count for Leprechaun, the OG version.
So yeah, so I mean, like I said, this movie always has a good place in my dark heart. Like I said, I mean, like I've always been a huge Warwick Davis fan. I'm all about the original one, and like I said, I love this movie. I mean, there were bits and parts of it that I could have done without and stuff like that, but overall, like, I love this movie. I thought it was one of the better Leprechaun movies that were out there. So I personally would give this a 7.5.
All right, right on for sure, man. No, I'm definitely with you on that one. I do consider it definitely up there for sure. Um, it's one of those movies that it's like, again, it sets the standard, it sets the mark. I think it's good. I think it's quality. I think they put a lot of thought into it, which is definitely very, very tricky. Again, with a new franchise, a kind of an uncommon theme, and a a debut, let alone movie, let alone franchise, but also a debut production company. But I definitely think it's solid. I definitely think it's a good one for sure. For me, it's a 7. That's it definitely deserves like high marks. But again, it has a little bit of that camp. It's got a little bit of that lowbrow, that kind of basic B-rate style. But it's definitely a solid one for sure. So usually when you and I don't quite match, we usually kind of meet in the middle, but you and I don't really do 0.25s and we don't really do 0.75s. But considering that it is a standard and it got the franchise going, what do you think about giving the OG the extra little nudge there? And what do you think about going with your mark of a 7.5?
Yeah, I think that sounds pretty good. I think a 7.5 is a good solid marker for meeting in the middle and giving it a couple extra brownie points
Yeah.
for originality.
Sounds good. We're going to go with that. Vampire and Devil. Leprechaun 1, the first Leprechaun, starring Warwick Davis and Jennifer Aniston. We are giving it a 7.5 on the obituaries for the kills. Its competition, Leprechaun 3. So that's the one that I'm really into personally. It takes place in Vegas. I just loved the style of it. I liked the uniqueness of it. It definitely did up its campiness. It out camps the first one, but I think quite a bit. I think that's a pretty safe agreement when it comes to that, because there's a lot of weirdness in that particular movie, whether they had some availability to do different things with the budget or just really wanted to go kind of outside their comfort zone and think outside the box. But that movie also actually has a really, really unique cast with it also, which I always thought was actually really, really cool and very, very unique, because you have, for example, Lee Armstrong, who I think did a great job in that movie, and she quit acting right after it.
Yeah.
You had John Gattens, who played the main character, played Scott, who was also in Witchboard 2. You know how much I love that series. But he was also in Pumpkinhead 2 and even wrote the story for the most recent Kong movie in Skull Island, which I thought was very, very cool. Then you've also got people like Carolyn Williams, who was in Texas Chainsaw Part 2. She played Loretta, one of kind of the villains of the movie. And then, of course, Warwick Davis reprising his role as the Leprechaun.
Oh yeah, like you were saying, they upped everything in this movie. The more one-liners, more camp, more dead bodies, more gruesome, nasty stuff throughout the movie. I mean, yeah, this movie definitely doubled everything that the original Leprechaun did.
Yeah. And so this is kind of an interesting and fun way, I think, for us to start, is right at the start of the movie with how the Leprechaun is brought back in. Because the one thing I thought was kind of interesting is the first movie, like we just discussed, ended with the death of the Leprechaun by, ingesting of the 4-leaf clover. Well, The third movie starts off where the second movie ends, but that's him frozen as a statue due to a an iron, basically, amulet, very similar to the Chucky amulet, but an iron amulet necklace, because leprechauns can't handle iron, can't touch it, can't deal with it at all. But it's kind of interesting where the first movie centered around four-leaf clovers being the death of a leprechaun, but the second movie decided to implement where it might not necessarily obviously kill the leprechaun, but now we're going to give another option to how you can defeat the leprechaun, where if there's no four-leaf clovers handy, if you can attach iron to him, you can turn him into a statue and escape that way, which I just thought was kind of an interesting jump, because they didn't really acknowledge the original way to kill a leprechaun. They just decided to go this amulet version instead. But that also leads to an interesting point, that the pawn shop that gets their hands on this leprechaun statue with the amulet is pawned for $20, and the statue's like half the size of a person.
Yeah, that's what we were talking about. It's like, let alone how, like, okay, this is in the mid '90s or so. So even like money wise difference and stuff like that. I mean, that like I said, that past that bronze, that statue is supposed to be the size of what would be predominantly Warwick Davis' size, which would be the Warlocks. I mean, the Leprechauns' size. And yeah, so you go and you do that. Okay, so it's like 4 foot tall or something around there, 4 foot something statue. Not even including the amulet, just the statue alone is, as far as this is like a, this big huge statue, like $20 for that thing. That thing weighs like probably a ton.
Yeah.
And then like I said, plus you got the amulet, that jewel alone for itself is probably worth thousands of dollars. And this guy was like, whatever. This homeless dude that had it was like, yeah, whatever. I'm like, that's the best deal. I was like, that's the best deal in the entire world, man. I want to give somebody $20 for that statue.
I know, seriously, but the fact that this homeless dude is just like carrying this thing around like Joe Dirt Meteor style.
Yeah.
Like, come on, bro. I always thought that was definitely some absurdity. But, in typical not listening fashion, it usually takes an idiot to start things off. And while the homeless person, who was still knowledgeable of what the amulet was doing and its function, warned the pawn shop owner not to touch it, and he's just like, nah, I'm going to check out this amulet that seems like a hunk of junk, but I'm going to shit on it and make fun of it, wear it, and remove it off the leprechaun, and then there you go. You freed the demon.
Yep. And then once he frees the leprechaun, that's when the one-liners start. That's when it first started off. He notices that in typical stereotypical fashion, the pawn person is an Indian person. So he goes, Indian food, I love it. It's spicy.
Yeah, seriously. It's like, okay, yep. There's our hint of non-existent cancel culture. Right off the bat in that early 90s type stuff. But the movie does take place in Vegas, is shot dominantly in Vegas guerrilla style, which is really, really unique and very tricky. We've talked about that in previous movies we talked about when it comes to like low budget or just needing particular shots. Brian Trenchard Smith directed this one, From the Quest and Dead End Drive, Night of the Demons 2. He also does reprise his directing role in the next Leprechaun as well, so it's just worth throwing that in. But yeah, it's shot in Vegas pretty much in one day, mixed with whatever they could get away with also, and centers around, Scott and Lee's characters, basically Tammy, basically meeting up. Scott's on his way to Vegas. He picks up Tammy, whose car's broken down on the side of the road. She needs to get to work, and he sweet talks her into letting him into the casino despite her best judgment, despite the fact that she could get in a lot of trouble, fired, and he's a minor, decides to let him in just so that he can check it out, and finds that he finagles his way into gambling. And it starts off badly for him, with him basically losing everything because they've figured him out. It's a crooked casino, and they're taking him for everything he's worth with crooked rigged games. But then he gets his hands on the coin, and that turns his luck around.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like, yeah, when you get into that whole beginning of that movie, like, the damsel in distress, and like you said, she works for the casino, she works for a quote unquote really bad magician, and like you said, you find out that the casino is really crooked, and basically he loses all his money. He takes like I don't know why you would pull out $23,000 and decide to take that to a casino all of a sudden and play it. Not even to only just lose $23,000 in a casino is insane, but to lose it all playing just one game.
Right.
Like, you didn't even change. Like, after a while, I'm like, okay, something's going on. I'm going to a different chair. I'm going to go to a different game. I'm going to go somewhere else and see if I can at least try to win some of that money back. But he doesn't, and he goes and he tries to figure out. And she's like, well, you can go to the pawn shop and pawn your, because I think he had like a nice watch or something like that
Yep.
that his grandfather gave him. So he wanted to go to the pawn shop, goes to the pawn shop person's dead or dying, and because being attacked by the leprechaun, and he finds the gold coin and wishes he was back in the casino, and poof, he's in the casino, and his luck starts going up, and that's when it starts getting crazy, because again, like we knew in the first movie, you don't mess with a leprechaun's gold.
Yep, absolutely. And so Warwick is going around. He's starting to kind of take people out little by little and move around as he's simply looking for his coin, looking for his shilling. And, you can't mess with his gold, just like you said. But it's kind of interesting with these like multiple like dynamics that are like all in cahoots, but they're all idiots, but they're also all respectively greedy. So you've got like the crooked kind of casino owner guy, kind of like just the fat slob type of guy who thinks he's still kind of God's gift to women. You've got Loretta, who's kind of like the wannabe like magician's assistant, but she's not overly attractive. And so she's just kind of like put off to the side as like basically a table vendor, and whatever you call the person who's like in charge of the games, whether it's a blackjack dealer or in her case like the craps table. And then you've got the wannabe magician who thinks he's awesome, but he's just a hack and not that great, all kind of like trying to get a better life, trying to get anything they can at the expense of the customers, but also trying to like one up each other.
Yeah. Throughout the whole entire movie, you just figure out like everybody in this one casino is just a bad character. And like you said, they all, the original guy's got the coin, and then it goes to the casino owner, and he has a run-in with Warwick and the Leprechaun, and via a girl coming out of the TV, giving him some loving, and then all of a sudden turns into a robot and shocks him and kills him. Then you got Loretta's character getting it because she wants to be beautiful and young, and her tits looking nice. And I don't know how you would think of it, but I love Caroline Williams. I think she's a very cool actress and all that. Yeah, it was kind of weird. All of a sudden, all she literally did was just get a haircut in this movie, and that was pretty much in more a sluttier outfit. And apparently now she's more attractive. And I'm like, I don't 100% get that. Okay, so a haircut makes you sexier, but anyway, she gets it, and then like you said, the magician gets a hold of the coin and actually becomes a real good magician. And yeah, it's like everybody is basically like, that's the thing about these movies. They're always about people's greed.
Yeah.
And people wanting to, and then like you said, then throughout the whole entire thing, you have the person fighting, and the guy, when he gets the coin, that's the part we missed, the part where he gets the coin, he gets bit by the leprechaun, and some of the leprechaun's blood gets into his system, and that becomes some of the campiness of this movie too, because not only did other people have gotten throughout all the leprechaun movies, they've gotten bitten by him and didn't turn into a leprechaun. This guy all of a sudden starts turning into a leprechaun. So throughout the whole entire movie, he's talking normal. Then all of a sudden he goes, "I am me lucky times." He starts talking like an Irishman, and it was just like it's just so randomly odd in this movie where like all of a sudden, because apparently it said like this video was telling you about it in the pawn shop. This guy has a computer that tells you the lore of leprechauns for some reason. I don't know why that was on his computer, but apparently he's got it.
Well,
And
he looked it up early because he had been talking leprechauns and stuff like that with the homeless guy about this statue that he got. So his curiosity, especially once the leprechaun became real, was what he looked it up himself.
okay, but yeah. So yeah, but the craziness of this movie was just nuts throughout the whole entire movie. I did find one thing that I read about, which was kind of interesting. I only seen one time in this movie, but apparently there are rumors that Warwick Davis played multiple characters throughout this whole entire movie in disguises just periodically throughout the whole entire movie. I only remember seeing him one time though. He's in the casino when the kid first comes into the casino. You see him at the very end of the casino playing it, and there's a few. You can notice there's a few of the little people that were with him that are all in that beginning line of the casino, and you can see him. But yeah. Throughout the movie, apparently he's supposed to be like multiple times, but I only remember seeing him that once.
Yeah, same for sure. But that might be kind of a fun little Easter egg thing sometime to just kind of like look back into and just be like, you know what? Let me just kind of see if we can find the Warwicks and just kind of see how things go. But yeah, but let's talk a little bit about like the kills, not for the obituaries, but just for the kills in general, because a lot of the kills are unique, and you've already touched base on them. So you had the greedy like casino owner, who the whole reason that he got the coin was to prove a point that he could get any woman that he wanted, which came at the expense of Tammy, where he basically was like, oh yeah, I wish I could get a girl like that because I can. And all of a sudden, Tammy shows up just hot for him. Also talking very just bimbo Valley Girl style, which I'll admit was incredibly annoying because
Yeah.
I liked her a lot in the movie just in general. And again, she's playing multiple characters, multiple personalities because of what the role entails. But the kind of bubble-headed Valley Girl thing was annoying to me. I couldn't really get as into it, but it was valuable for the purpose of what they were trying to portray. But yeah, so he's he gets what he wishes for, but then it gets flipped on him when he loses the coin, and then yeah, the girl that comes out of the TV turns into an electric shock. So he's basically almost electrocuted, almost electric chair style, while he was basically getting his rocks off. And then when it comes to Loretta, which is interesting because you and I talked about body horror on a previous episode, is that's basically along the lines of her death, which is kind of that almost body modification, addicted to the knife kind of thing. Like, what would you do to be more beautiful? Where, yeah, just like you said, cut her hair, wore a sluttier outfit, and suddenly she's hot. But you could also tell, like, she's, for her ugly character, there's a body suit of some type that she's wearing or whatever to make her body less like sexy and more old lady. Like, man, I wish I was like that hot, fit 20-year-old again, which is basically what her wish was. And then Leprechaun takes it out on her by turning her lips into duck lips, making her boobs inflate, her butt inflate to where she can't even get out the door, just to have her basically explode like a balloon. And then you have the, magician, Fazio, I think he was going by, just kind of get flipped on him where he's like, oh no, I'm going to show you a real trick. And a typical saw in half that should just be the saw in half trick is his full on demise.
Yeah. It was like I said, some of those kills were iconic. Like I said, her blowing up in a million pieces was kind of almost Scanner like he just goes in a million pieces, and all of a sudden I can't remember 100% of what line he says, but he says something about, I think he says, I think he's calling for rain or something like that, and he puts out an umbrella real quick as all the pieces are going everywhere.
No, and
Yeah,
I loved the little like throwback to almost kind of like Aubrey Hepburn style things where he just kind of turns around, a little twirl on the umbrella, and then he just walks away, and almost like Singing in the Rain style, where
yeah.
it's just like, okay, very cheeky, very kind of unique and stuff. And then, and by that time, as the Leprechaun's taking people out and is basically rid himself and everybody else of like the secondary villains, I guess you could say, is when they get back to the point where Scott, by this point, is like very Leprechaun-ish, but then it kind of turns into a Leprechaun v Leprechaun showdown.
Oh yeah, yeah. Eventually, like you were saying, we were talking about the things to kill a leprechaun on that computer. Apparently, a leprechaun does not like another leprechaun in their own territory. So when there's a leprechaun and a leprechaun, there's going to be a duel, which is kind of like what we're doing in this Leprechaun versus Leprechaun 3. But it was pretty interesting. The Warwick's leprechaun tries to persuade him by giving him his own pot of gold, but he knows that you can't trust a leprechaun.
Absolutely, for sure. And so that leads us down towards the end where, again, in that freedom style fashion, is that Scott and Tammy are able to, sever themselves from the leprechaun, not only in Warwick, but also in basically the infection, I guess you can say, that turns Scott into a leprechaun.
Yeah, yeah, and then like I said, throughout this whole entire movie too, that we're talking about, the main girl, she's very very beautiful, very blonde, very Vegas type, and then the main guy, very dorky, very skinny, very scrawny, and I'm like, how in the hell are these two together? I'm like, only in movies can this be together. As like these guys are writing this stuff, we're like, I wish I had a girl like this, so I want to make a movie where a guy like me gets a girl like her.
Right, absolutely, for sure. And so to wrap up this movie, as we come over to the obituaries and discuss what we think our kill count should be for this one, before we discuss how we're gonna finish off the showdown with a victory. So for me, it's very similar to you from your review of Leprechaun. Is that this movie just it's in my special place. I love the style of it. I love the slightly extra camp to it, but I also love the heavier kill count with the unique kills and the way they were delivered. There's definitely a little more weirdness and a little bit more like, really, where you don't get that in the first Leprechaun, where it's a little bit more of a straight delivery horror movie with a comedy aspect. You get a little bit more in what Chucky kind of started morphing to with those movies in Leprechaun 3, where it was probably more like, 75%, 25% in the traditional Leprechaun as far as like, horror to comedy. But then it's a little closer to like 50-50 in Leprechaun 3, where it's probably not exactly half and half, but probably like 60-40, where it's still a horror movie, especially because there's more kills, but you definitely get more of that comedic aspect by far. But I actually give it the same rating that you gave yours. Is I give it a 7.5. I do like it overall a little bit more than Leprechaun 3, with the uniqueness of the kills, the extra camp, and I just love the stylistic of it happening in Vegas. So for me, I always found 7.5 is the way to go for me when it came to Leprechaun 3.
Oh yeah, I mean, I'm pretty much in agreement too. I think a 7.5 on this movie is a good rating because, like I said, it's got its one-liners, it's got its death kills, it's got its comedy, it's got its good skits and it's good acting and stuff like that. But like I said, something about that this movie wasn't filmed nearly as great as like the original one was. And there were like you said, there were definitely parts of this movie that were better in the third one than the original one. And then there were parts of the original one that I liked better in the third one, you know. So it's like I definitely would give this a 7.5 too as well.
All right, sounds good. So we're in agreement with Leprechaun 3 being a 7.5. So that's our official kill rating on the obituaries. Now, this poses a very interesting thing for us that we have yet to come across. Probably won't be the first time it happens, but it's the first time that it's happened for us. Our showdown, Vampire vs. Devil, has ended in a tie of 7.5 for Leprechaun and 7.5 for Leprechaun 3. So what do you think? How do we decide who actually gets the victory in this? If I'm being honest about it, I do feel that you kind of have to give certain tiebreakers to what started it off. So there is a part of me that feels that Leprechaun should be the way to go when it comes to the victory. But what do you think, Devil? Where's your mind at when it comes to that decision? Or what do you think it should be?
I think with a tie, I think in general, what you said, generally, yeah. If it's a tie, if it's a movie that you're going OG versus maybe a sequel or something like that, yeah, you got to give it to the original one. But I think in this one, we should give it to the fans because the fans win with any Leprechaun movie. You get to enjoy good movies, and it's a fan win. It's a little bit of luck of the Irish today.
Absolutely. It definitely is. It is a luck of the Irish fans. We know how much you love your holidays. You love your gore. You love your horror. You love your leprechauns. So it's a win no matter what for the fans when it comes to Leprechaun. But we are going to call this in agreement that in Vampire versus Devil Showdown, the victory goes to Leprechaun, the OG. So fatality to Leprechaun 3. Victory to the devil.
Yeah, it's about fucking time.
So there you have it, our ghouls, our goblins, our beloved spooks and creeps. That marks the end of this particular showdown of Vampire versus Devil. And with a rating of 7.5 for Leprechaun, 7.5 for Leprechaun 3, but tiebreaker always goes to the original, what kicked it off, and the OG. Again, victory for the devil, defeat for the vampire, fatality. We will see you guys soon for our very next showdown. Horns up, bangs out.
What's up? It's the devil here. Just wanted to make a quick announcement to let you know we've added a little extra to the Vampire and Devil podcast. Oh yeah, she's a little creepy, a little spooky, definitely kooky. You might have seen her creeping around your horror conventions. She might be Vampire and Devil's illegitimate child, but that's purely speculation. Anyway, we'd like to introduce you to Kid Dreadful. She's gonna be adding a little bit extra fun and guts and blood, maybe some survival tips to the House of the Devils. You should go and check her out at Kid Dreadful on your social medias. And if you don't, the devil might come and see you. What's up, it's your boy the devil here with another quick movie review. Just got done watching the 2023 movie Moon Garden. It was a pretty crazy movie about a little girl that falls comatose and goes into this darkness world. It was pretty insane, pretty creepy, lots of stop-time animation, kind of a realm between the real world and this nightmarish world. It was pretty cool. You should check it out. I like watching the Vampire and Devil show. Sometimes you'll hear me crying in the background.
Showdowns, ghouls and goblins. Showdowns, spooks and creeps. That's what happens when you pit vampire versus the devil. We are going to continue with just that. More showdowns are what we're about. More showdowns are what you're going to get. So we're going to start off right now talking a little bit about our newest one, April Fools, their children.
Yeah, it's time for a little April Fool's fanatic-y.
Yes, for our victims, our followers, our cult like enjoyment. So, we decided to have a little bit of fun off of our namesakes with movies that have vampire and devil in the title, but aren't horror movies. Just because we can.
Yeah, April Fool's, motherfuckers.
April Fools, motherfuckers. Tutti fucking fruity.
Yep. So what we did, we decided, how can we fuck with our fans as much as we can, pulling a little April Fool's whippity-doo to you. So we decided, let's do something that's not typically in our wheelhouse. We're going to do movies that are not your horror movies. So we decided to do movies that were like, what can we make that fans would never think that we would ever do a commentary or a review about? So we decided to go with some vampire and a devil movie that's off the wall.
And off the wall is what you get.
Yep. So what I did was, for my devil movie, I picked the classic She Devil.
She Devils.
With Roseanne Barr, which nowadays probably is what people call her.
Yep. And for me, I took The Little Vampire.
I am Little One.
Starring Jonathan Lipnicki, which we don't really know if he's so Jerry Maguire-esque anymore, but he might still be youthful if he got that bite.
Yep.
So why don't you kick this one off, man? Why don't you start off talking a little bit about She-Devil?
So, it came to my attention that Vampire has never seen She-Devil before watching this movie.
Facts.
And I was like, what? Okay, so anyway, She-Devil is a great movie. I love it. Like I said, it has Roseanne Barr in it. It also has freaking Ed Bigley Jr., which I always loved him in Transylvania 6 5000. I love that movie.
Yes.
And then it's got Meryl Streep, who some horror people will know from Death Becomes Her. And I mean, she's in everything, Mamma Mia. And
The
I mean,
Devil Wears Prada.
Yeah, The Devil Wears Prada, which you never know. Maybe I'll review that someday because it is a devil movie. But anyway, yeah, it's basically about a woman, Roseanne's character. She's trying to make herself look beautiful for her husband, and she reads a lot of trashy romantic horror, romantic books, and is infatuated with this one author. And they go to a party, and the author happens to be there, which is Meryl Streep's character. And she meets her husband, and he starts working for her, and then eventually starts working her.
Yes, absolutely. A little bit of adultery going on there, and in typical adultery fashion. No, dear, I just work late. She has me doing any things. I blew out a tire on the highway, so I just decided to get a hotel.
Yeah, it was like, it's all kind of like cool, like, oh no, honey, I'm not doing anything. And like she even says it, like, I trust my husband. He literally gets to her house, and within 5 minutes they're already doing the nasty. Like,
Yeah.
he didn't take very much persuading to eventually do it. So eventually, Roseanne gets mad. Her character gets mad and evil and starts figuring out, how can I plot his demise because my husband's a cheating bastard? So she comes up with a list of things that he loves the most, which is his house, his family, his career, and his freedom. So the first thing she destroys is the house. And you just see her go run a muckery, putting things in a microwave that are gonna explode. She's got a hair dryer underneath a pillow that's gonna catch on fire. And just like 80s cheese, the house blows up right behind her, which was horribly, horribly green screen, but it was still funny.
Yeah. Yeah, it was very, very ridiculous. You could definitely tell that it was an 80s movie. A late 80s movie, but an 80s movie all the same.
Yeah. Yeah. The whole you can definitely tell like just the culture. They go into the mall. It's so like that late 80s, early 90s like feel to it. Like even watching it now, some of the stuff that goes on throughout the movie, it's like, oh my god, it reminds you of those late 80s, early 90s stuff.
Yeah. And I mean, it is interesting too, because the funny thing is, it's almost a slight reverse of what you consider traditional adultery, which is the man going after, the new love interest for him. It really was kind of the other way around. It was really Meryl Streep's character falling for Ed Begley Jr., who isn't exactly a bad looking cat, but at the same time, it's not exactly a stud muffin either, especially. And I feel like we've been talking about this a lot lately,
Yeah.
especially with the late 80s and early 90s movies about these like just kind of common dudes scoring these very good looking women and stuff like that. But basically, yeah, it's Meryl Streep actually, wanting to have Ed Begley Jr.'s character with her and giving him a job, keeping him around, and kind of making him fall for her. Don't get me wrong, it's not like he puts up much of a fight either.
Yeah.
But in defense of what's stereotypically, the guy just being over his wife and looking for something new or falling for the shiny new toy, it was actually the shiny new toy that came a calling.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and like I said, and I don't remember exactly how old uh, Meryl Streep was. I'm gonna say I think she was in her like the late 30s to early 40s at the time, and she was smoking hot. I don't care what anybody says, man. She looked good in that movie, rolling around half naked half the time and stuff like that. So, like I said, this was Roseanne Barr, like per the late 80s, early 90s with the Roseanne show. So she wasn't your typical Roseanne. Plus, she had like a fake mole on her face. She was. I mean, it was meant to be a character that was meant to be overly like kind of disgusting and kind of piggish. So of course, like, if you're a husband, you see this beautiful blonde coming to you, you're gonna one go that way versus your boring housewife.
Right. So yeah, so Roseanne Barr horrifically green screen explodes their house, and then to quickly cap off the next item off of her list of Bob's assets was family, which was also a very interesting way of doing that because it's again almost a little backwards of again what you would call the stereotypical thing, where usually you're taking the person's family away from them, making it so they can't see their family anymore. This was her dumping the kids on Bob and being like, no, you now have the swanky lifestyle. You're going to take care of these kids. We have no home anymore. I'm basically out on the street. So I'm sure the kids will just enjoy living with you and, your whore, basically better now. So you deal with it and I'm just going to take off. And that's when she kind of breaks off into doing her own thing, kind of starting her own career, which is basically this company that gives, job opportunities to women who don't think that they can get good jobs or are just kind of down on their luck. And in the meantime, the kids, of course, kind of turn into spoiled brats, but at the same time, they also aren't really seeing eye to eye with Meryl Streep. So that kind of plays into it and sets up for the newest kind of enticing situation, which is Roseanne going after Bob's career by setting him up because she knows him better and she lived it, but sets him up for another case of infidelity by basically setting up his new smoking hot secretary.
Yeah, she hires your typical 80s bimbo kind of girl that's like the blonde with the perky boobs and the perky butt and kind of is stereotypical airhead. But in this case, she kind of was bubbly, but she wasn't very airheady. She was actually pretty a good accountant.
Yeah.
And Roseanne knew that he was gonna fall for her automatically so that she can get set up with all the shady accounting thing that he always does. And she was able to go on the computer and change things around and make it look like he was stealing more money, which he was stealing money. He just wasn't really particularly doing this. They just made it look more obvious so that he can get found out about what the stuff he is doing.
Yep. Absolutely, for sure. Like, and that's the thing that's interesting as well, too, because again, it's always the little things. And in this case, it's Bob nailing the secretary on a photocopy machine, making photocopies of her ass, but his hands are in the photos with a ring that Meryl Streep gave him.
Yeah. Yeah, he kind of didn't think about that to begin with. He was get too hot in the moment. So he was like, "Oh yeah," and then he can't even do the R. Kelly wasn't me, because obviously it's him, because he's the only person in existence that has that ring.
Yep.
So it basically destroys that, and that the whole theory. He's like, "Oh God," and Meryl Streep gets freaking pissed off at him. So now he's losing everything else.
Yeah, and because that's the other thing too that's really crazy. So like she's basically, so he loses his career because she's basically like, yeah, I'm over it, get out of my house, and you're fired. But the funny thing about that is because he's trying to save his, for lack of a better term, marriage. The secretary's fallen for him, but she's also kind of got a case of like whatever, vomit mouth or whatever, because she's the one who actually spills the beans to Roseanne that he's been swindling his, customers by basically making them pay these extra insurances, incentives or whatever. But that money doesn't go to like the company. It gets just off into his own private bank account. But in the big picture, it's not overly detectable, where it's kind of like, it's almost kind of like what they talk about in the movie Office Space, where they're like, when you make all these transactions, you're left with like these fractions of a cent that aren't really worth cataloging or even really paying attention to. But as they build up over time, which is basically the whole setup for that, which is like, oh, okay. So since the secretary that Bob now fucked over by upsetting her and pissing her off, she's got access to all of his finances and all of his passwords because that's what she does for him or did for him. And so that's what gets him busted by the feds, is they set it up to where they're like, well, normally it would only be, $20 or $200 of like these thousands of dollars that come out of this person's account. We're going to move $200,000 out of this person's account to my account. And that was the whole like plan behind that. Gets him busted pretty much instantly. But the funny thing about it, he's got his lawyer, who's a really good lawyer, but he looks like he's going to get taken care of by technicality due to the fact that they're going to blame the inadequacies of computers, and that at the time, or so they thought, they had a judge who was basically their golfing buddy.
Yeah. Then you find, then it goes back to people who worked for Roseanne and her company that she helped out. She helped out a lady that happens to work at the courthouse, and she gets her to switch the judges that she was supposed to see, and he gets a judge that doesn't take him very lightly. I like that's the part of this movie that's really crazy. It's like as much as evil as Roseanne's character is, she's very calculating. It's all these moves that she's doing. She's like a chess player. It's always 6, 7 steps ahead of what's going on. Like she knows that like, okay, I'm gonna go and quit my job. And when I quit my job, I'm gonna work at a nursing home. The nursing home just happens to be the nursing home that Meryl Streep's mom works for, so that she can get her to get out of there, so that Meryl Streep's mom can be at the house and drive her crazy. So it's like everything she does, it's like 100% calculating. She's already like 10 steps ahead of everybody, which is like insane. Like, yeah, like this woman is that talented and that kind of stuff. Like, well, imagine how she could be. And like I said, this company that she makes is like a, apparently does pretty good because they have like a decent amount of money when they start doing it.
Yeah, because that was the thing that was able to get his ass thrown in jail, is a person who, a down on their luck woman who couldn't get a job because nobody took her seriously. Roseanne took a chance on to find her something that she could do, because she said that she was just like good with like clerical work or something like that, and ends up being the person who's just kind of in charge of like tracking and scheduling the judges for the court cases. So it literally was only a phone call away, where I forget the judge's name off the top of my head, but basically was like, hey, can you do me a favor? Can you not have Judge like Bridges or whatever on Bob's case? And she's like, yeah, no problem. And you see her take down Judge Bridges and replace it with Judge Brown, who basically comes off almost kind of like the assassin judge,
Yeah. Yeah, she's like one of those like Judge Judy's that doesn't take shit from no one. She's like, yeah, no, we're not gonna give you a little slap on the wrist. No, you're getting sentenced and you're gonna go to prison.
Right, because it's like, look, yes, you are a pillar of the community. Yes, people like you. Yes, you do a lot of good things, but you stole tons of money from the people that trusted you. And don't get me wrong, despite the fact that, it's a fictitious movie that's kind of rooted in fact, that, however, is reality. And I do think that there are cases of just that do go in both directions. The punishable still doesn't get punished, or the punishable does get punished. But that really is the truth. When you take advantage of the people that you've sworn to protect, that there's like, as the old saying goes, there's no bigger crime.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I said. And the crazy thing about it, like, when it gets to the end of this movie, Ed Begley's character goes to prison, and prison actually does him good. He seems like, when he gets out of prison, that he actually wants to be a good pillar of society now, and actually like wants to be around his kids and stuff like that, where it was like, maybe in the long run, he needed to lose everything to kind of get back to reality.
Yep, absolutely, for sure. So let's talk a little bit about the obituaries. Let's talk a little bit about the kill count. Your movie, you start, man. How do you see it?
I mean, for me, this movie has definitely a soft spot in my heart. Like I said, I mean, whether or not you like Roseanne now or you don't like Roseanne now, back in the 80s and the early 90s, you couldn't get away from her. She was awesome. I loved the shows. I loved the movies that she was doing. I loved her stand up. I love the fact that she sang the national anthem at a baseball game, grabbing her crotch and spitting. Personally, why would you ask somebody who is completely insane like that to do something like that? So for me, I'm like a huge fan of her, huge fan of Meryl Streep. Like I said, a huge fan of Ed Begley Jr. And like I said, to me, I think this movie is like all about like that little person getting back at the person who's treated them bad so long. And like I said, a lot of women could feel like this movie about them become considered she devils because they're doing conniving evil things. But then again, if your husband wasn't a cheating piece of shit, you probably wouldn't have had any of this done to you. So yeah, for me, this movie will always be good and great. Like I said, it's a comedy. It's got a little bit of like satire to it and a little bit of reality to it. But overall, I love this movie. It's a movie that if it's on, I'm gonna watch it all the time. So I'm gonna give this definitely a 7.5.
Absolutely, man, for sure. Like I'm definitely with you. Um, I'm I'm with you on all of those aspects. I'm not exactly what you would call a fan of the cast, not because the cast is bad. The cast is amazing, like all legends in their own right. I just personally and simply not a fan of those actors. I think the casting of the movie is absolutely fantastic. I think it's dynamite. I think it's a really, really good one. Um, I like the overall movie just in general. It was really enjoyable. I'm glad you picked it for this showdown. I thought it was really cool. I thought it definitely had really unique strands of like darkness where you see these plots, you see these scams and these schemes, and then and the way they react to them, and you're just like, fuck, that's cold blooded. Almost makes you kind of like rethink like plans that you would make and stuff like that if you're looking to not necessarily to do something bad behind your mate's like back, but just where it's like, you know what, maybe it's just better to just simply let them know where I'm going anyway, even if I'm just going to the grocery store. It kind of makes you worry about that. But it's a solid movie. I definitely find it enjoyable. It's a solid one for me. I give it a 7 myself. I definitely would see it again for sure. I'm in. Like I said, great cast, great delivery, and great overall writing as well. I just don't quite have those personal ties to it that you do. So 7 is my number. And like we've discussed before, we don't really do the 0.25 and the 0.75. So what do you think? 7.5 on the strength of cast?
Oh yeah, I think especially because like you said, it's a movie with Meryl Streep, who is known as a worldwide actress, and doing these kind of movies that she was doing in the 80s is insane. But compared to like what the stuff she's doing now, where she's making these huge Oscar-winning movies and doing this kind of movie, this cheesy camp stuff.
Yeah, but it definitely worked for her for sure. Like it's easy to kind of like look at things and just be like, oh well, now she's doing like a cheesy camp thing. No, she's kind of not. Like, yeah, there is that in the way it's put together, 100%, but it's not over the top like cheesy and campy because, like I said before, it is a fictitious movie though that's rooted and based in fact
Yeah,
and
yeah.
real scenarios.
Oh yeah, for sure. It's definitely something that a lot of people can relate to, at least to a certain extent. Maybe they're not blowing up their houses and
Yeah.
and giving their kids away to a mansion, but like in general, it's definitely something that's rooted with real world antics.
Yes, 100% for sure. So that's how we're calling it there, ghouls and goblins. We are calling She Devil a 7.5 on the obituaries based off strength of casting. 7.5 for Devil, 7 for Vampire, but a 7.5 overall off of those strengths. So let's move our way into the second April Fool's movie, which is the one that I picked. Again, very similar to you, very, very close to my heart, just very partial for a movie that's slightly outside of this horror genre. Well, not even really slightly outside, very outside this horror genre, outside of the fact, though, that it is still a vampire movie, and that is The Little Vampire with Jonathan Lipnicki, who everybody, if not most people, know as the adorable young boy in glasses from Jerry Maguire, and he's still the adorable little boy in glasses. But basically, what this movie is based around is this family very traditional family, mother, father, child, that relocate to Scotland for a new job opportunity, just a new life. The son's out of, doesn't have any friends, new schools, doesn't really understand the culture, doesn't really understand, the way Scotland operates. And there's even fun things with the mom too, where they're talking about whether or not she's driving on the right side of the road. But he's always been incredibly infatuated with vampires. He loves them. He finds them just really interesting. He wants to be one. He dresses up as them, makes little paper fangs and puts them in his mouth with his like little red cape. And it's fully designed as a family movie. It's 100% a family movie. She-Devil, not so much. The little vampire, 100%. It's completely family friendly. It's not gory. It's not bloody. But one of the things that I really like about it, which we'll get into in more detail, is it is very well written and researched in like vampiric lore, which I always thought was very, very cool. But yeah, young boy, new scenario, out, living in a new country with his family, because of course, as a young kid, you don't really have a say in anything. The parents have this new opportunity, they're going to pull the trigger on it. So now he has to start this new life in this new country he doesn't understand, with frankly an uncommon, quirk and thing that he's into and lifestyle that he's into that's not understood by the common person. It's not relatable.
Yeah. Like I said, it's been a while since I've seen this movie, and I'm watching it again. And yeah, like to begin with, it's like you're watching that little kid. Just every time I see him just talk, I'm waiting for him to be like, the human brain weighs 8 pounds, or whatever he says from Jerry Maguire. It's definitely like one of those, like, he's one of those actors that, like, especially at that age when he was doing them, that was so like iconic. Like you can just not even be watching the movie and just hear his voice and know like that actor. And like I said, yeah, this is definitely a further movie from the She-Devil. Like you said, it's definitely very family oriented. But like She-Devil, it does have a really good cast.
Yes, it definitely does. I mean, you've got Jonathan Lipnicki, you've got Alice Krieg, you've got Frederick, you've got Richard Grant. It's really, really well casted. Like very, very unique. Where it's a little bit obviously more based around that European style cast, because again, you're taking into account like what the movie's about, like where the movie's shot and all that kind of stuff. So that's always something that you kind of have to keep in mind. You've got Rollo Weeks, who I thought was absolutely amazing as Rudolph, who's basically the follow through, the follow up to he's basically like the partner in crime. And Devil, the one thing I also got to say about this movie, as far as a casting thing that is just pretty bitchin', is, I mean, it's got Alice Krieg in there. You and I have a cool history with Alice Krieg. I mean, we met her at Monster Mania Con a couple years ago when she had like nobody in line, but I really wanted to meet her because she was like, she was the witch and Hansel and Gretel, and I was like, I really would like to meet her. And she was so nice. She like almost wouldn't let us leave the table because we were like just talking about stuff she wanted to talk about, and she loved that we liked her movies, and we talked about the Salem witch trials because at the time she had just got done filming and was waiting for the release of She Will, which is almost kind of like a Salem witch trials in Sweden movie.
Yeah. It was kind of cool. Like she was just like super nice, telling us a little story about like, about that, making that movie, and like someone in her family or somebody that she knew that was part of that, the real story of that. So yeah, it was like, she was super, super cool to meet with. And just, and like I said, a lot of people know her as the Borg Queen from Star Trek, but like I said, she's always been in a lot of cool horror movies. Like she's like one of those actresses that once you see her, you kind of notice, and that's how it was in this movie. It was like, oh yeah, there she is.
Yep. No, 100%. And I mean, so yeah, she's just awesome people. So it's always cool to talk about movies that you've got like a personal tie with like a cast member to and stuff like that. And we'll definitely have plenty more of those in the future. That's a fact for sure. But anyway, getting into this movie, the thing that's kind of cool is so you've got, Jonathan's character, getting really buddy buddy with Rolo's character and, trying to kind of live that vampire life, but while also looking out for them because he's a commoner. He's a human. He's not a vampire. But Rolo's parents are very old school vampire traditional. They don't want outsiders knowing about their lifestyle and getting involved. But also at the same time, you've got the kind of Van Helsing like character, almost like the Edgar Frog in the later Lost Boys movies, where it's kind of like that guy who's still just living that life, who's still trying to take out the vampires.
Yeah, his character was like super crazy. He kind of reminded me of like your old school rocker that was from back in the day, and like he was really big in the 80s, and now it's 2023 and he's still trying to like be like, hey, remember me when I recorded an album that had one hit song that was 30 years ago? I'm still cool, ain't I? And that's what he kind of reminded me of a little bit, like
He's just playing bars.
trying so hard to play the part that he's not very great at.
Yeah, and he's just playing bars now. Like, he's just living that rock lifestyle as a celebrity when it's like, dude, you're playing to like 10 people.
Yeah.
Like, hey, I'm all for no matter how many people are at your show performing to your best, but he's that kind of guy who's also still living in like that ego life.
Yeah. Yeah, he was like an over the top. Like I said, it was just like your stereotypical vampire hunter, but just like over the top kookiness and slapstick. That was probably like the funnier aspect of this movie, because it definitely is a very family comedy movie, but more of the comedy stuff was, I think, leaned more towards the vampire hunter.
Yeah, for sure, because he not only has this like washed up rocker living still stuck in the 80s vibe, but it's been like mashed with like Mad Max.
Yeah.
Because his truck is like, that fucking thing is just like, dude, like you'd almost expect Mel Gibson to be riding shotgun.
Yeah.
That thing is just this big gnarly thing with the guns and shooting stakes, and he's also kind of like living out of it as he's like on the hunt or on patrol or whatever. So it's definitely weird but yeah, that he is basically like your comic relief. Like he basically is that guy that you're like, he's a serious character that you can't really take serious, because Jonathan's parents are simply trying to be parents. They're trying to kind of nurture their kid through what they think is this phase. You've got, his best friend, who he finally has a best friend to connect with, but he's an outsider of his own right. Like, not only just because, hey, you're the nerdy kid with glasses who happen to become like just best friends with like the goth kid or like, or the cheerleader. It's like, he's not of this world literally, but they connect and they're besties. But you've got his parents who don't want his best friend around because he's literally not of their world.
Yeah, I mean, and like you said, the two kids becoming best friends, that's probably probably my favorite part of the whole entire movie is Jonathan's kid, the human. He getting bullied because he's, like you said, he's moved into a new country, he doesn't really know, and everybody's kind of making fun of him, and he's got these two kids that are bullying him the whole entire time, and then eventually he becomes friends with a vampire, and he's like, let's go and pay them a visit. And all of a sudden he comes out and he's like, I am the god of the underworld or something like that. And these kids are like, who in the hell is this dork? Let's beat him up. And then all of a sudden the other kid comes out and he's got, he's a real vampire. So he's like, and pulls out his bat wings and they're like, oh shit. And then like every time now they see this kid, he's like, oh yeah, you can hold my book bag and my books for me. And they're like, yes master, yes master. They like start like obeying this guy now because they, they're really scared because you got to realize you're a kid and you're like, oh, okay, whatever, whatever. Then all of a sudden you see a legit vampire and you're like, oh shit, yeah, okay, I'm gonna do whatever I can do to not see that thing again.
Yeah, seriously. It gave me a little bit of a it gave me a little bit of reminding of like the Craft. Obviously just without the spell. But when, one of the girls put the spell on, like, the kind of like the school bully who was like making fun of them because he was like claiming that they hooked up and that she was a terrible lay. Well, they put a love potion on him and suddenly he's carrying their books and he's acting all like, wimpy and like, whipped. So
Yeah.
the fact that they kind of scared these boys straight to a certain degree into not only being nice to Jonathan, but also kind of his slave. I
Yeah.
thought were his slaves. I thought was actually pretty cool and pretty funny. And so then, as we kind of make our way to the ending of this movie, where you've got the vampire family basically hunted down by the Van Helsing vampire hunter, and having them aided by Jonathan to see that he's got their backs. He's not trying to break up the family, not trying to get involved in them, but also understands the fact that the family actually, they are understanding of their lifestyle as vampires, but don't want to really live that lifestyle. They're kind of over it, or didn't really want it to begin with, but again, we're cool with just the dice that were rolled, and we're able to get out of that lifestyle, and we're actually transformed into humans.
Yeah. Yeah, I thought that part was pretty crazy too. It's like, usually it's a lot of times it's usually the opposite. Most people want to become vampires, like that little boy, like Jonathan, he wanted to become a vampire, and these guys who are all vampires kind of wanted to they were tired, like you said, they drank blood, but they try to drink blood from animals, which brings up the one of the craziest parts of the movie too, is they start feeding on cows, and because they feed on a cow and they don't kill the cow becomes a vampire cow. Then there's a couple of multiple vampire cows, and then the vampire cows come back to the movie and help out versus the vampire hunter, which was like so over the top. Like, I'm like, vampire cows? Like, who's got vampire cows in their movie? But apparently these guys do too.
Yeah, it's almost kind of Resident Evil-ish, but more of a family friendly slapstick where, you've got those, Resident Evil gene demon dogs that,
Yeah.
were infected. But yeah, and the closing part of the movie was interesting to me because it was this real just moment of sadness that kind of turns into like happiness, because the family becomes human, but they lose their memory of that lifestyle because they can't really be humans knowing that they just lived for whatever 300 years as vampires.
Yeah.
So they kind of lose their memory, but there's enough of the relationship left behind between Rudolph and Jonathan that Jonathan basically, he sings like their little tune, like their little catchphrase thing that was always kind of like their little thing, and it triggered a memory in Rudolph, and in Rollo's character, where you can tell he doesn't quite understand why, but he could tell and knew that this new little boy, this new friend of his, was going to be important. And I thought it was cool where the movie ends with Jonathan's character going off with, Rollo's character and, his sister, to go play.
Yeah. Yeah, I thought that was pretty interesting too. And then you mentioned the sister. I thought that was a funny part of the movie too, was, you got Jonathan joining his family and he's becoming friends with the Rolo guy. And then all of a sudden the sister's like madly in love with Jonathan, writing poetry and stuff like that. And then like the whole time I was watching this movie too, I was like, she looks kind of familiar. And then I found out that she's actually the older sister from the Lion and the Witch in the Wardrobe.
Yep.
She's the older sister of the three kids. I was like, okay, that's where I knew her from the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe.
Yeah.
But yeah,
When
she's trying to get into Jonathan's pants. She wants to see a
yeah.
little bit of she wants to see a little bit of Maguire's and Jerry's.
Yeah, absolutely. She sure did. Yeah, when they did the more updated like remade movies of The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, because I love the old BBC
Yeah.
movies for the Chronicles of Narnia. I was a huge fan of all of that. I thought that was super duper awesome. But yeah, no, it is funny, like, well, watching like that kind of thing, and again, just realizing like different actors and actresses that you either were always all over and knew because you're either a fan or you just know. But then it's also kind of cool watching these movies and being like, I know you from somewhere. I'm not exactly sure what that thing is, but I definitely know you from somewhere. You
Yeah.
know, even going back to the She Devil movie, the lady that played Hooper has that real, Edna look from The Incredibles, but is a very established actress who's been in like so many things, or even further back to the Leprechaun movies when we were talking about Loretta's character, who's ridiculously established, especially in horror movies.
Yeah, when you're talking about her character, Edna character, yeah, I always remember her. My favorite role for her, going back to the She Devil, was when she was in Kindergartner Cop. She was the
Yeah,
teacher from Kindergartner Cop. So yeah, it's like I like when you see these movies, especially a movie you haven't seen in a while. Because I personally am into kids movies. I like a lot of I like a lot of like family movies. I like a lot of cartoons and stuff still, and I this wasn't a particular movie I remember watching a lot. I remember seeing it before, but I'd probably been Jesus years probably since I'd seen it, and I completely forgot that some of these people were in that. I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot this person was in this movie.
yeah, no, absolutely, for sure. So let's get into our second obituaries. Talk about our kill count when it comes to Littlest Vampire, the Little Vampire. For me, it's very it's a very similar ranking to what to the in the way that I looked at this movie, the way that you look at She Devil. But and again, I like a lot of kids movies. I'm very nostalgic to my childhood, and I remember movies for a very long time, even stuff that doesn't might not exactly fit my aesthetic or be a lot of what I watch now. But I'll want to go back and watch them again, want to revisit them, and just have little moments where if I don't think about the movie for a while, I'll watch it probably 3 or 4 times in a week or two, just because it's fun to reconnect with that. But I've always loved this movie. It's always been really near and dear to my heart. It's based around my favorite topics. I loved the Scottish styling of it. I loved the attention to folklore, which is always very big to me when it comes to vampire movies. It's probably my number one critique when it comes to movies about vampire and vampire things is, did you take the time to do your research, to look at your folklore, and to make sure that you're not yes, of course you can have an outright just over the top campy stereotype movie, that's fine. But when you do want to do things based off culture, you really want to make sure that you're actually doing the research and looking up the proper folklore and the proper myths and the proper legends. I've always loved this movie. I love the cast. I love the direction. I love the style. And I also think it delivers a certain amount of impact. Honestly, it's a solid 8 for me. I've always been really high on this movie, and I do think it's very underrated. I do personally give it an 8.
Yeah, I mean, for me, like I said, it was a movie that that I didn't grow up really watching, because this was kind of this movie came out in the mid '90s or something like that. So by the time this movie came out, I was already older and stuff like that. So I was pretty much like kind of staying away from the kid movies as much. But it was like I said, I always remember, the kid being in Jerry Maguire, and like I said, I love the some of the other cast members and stuff like that. Like overall, like I said, for a kid movie, I hadn't seen in a while. It definitely was a lot better than what I was expecting. I was expecting it to remembering back being like, I don't know if I'm really gonna finish this full movie, kind of thing. But yeah, it definitely was a great movie. I thought it was really, really good. For me, like I said, I mean, far as a kid movie, I think that I guess depending on the campiness of it and the little kids and stuff like that, a lot of times those little kids can be annoying and stuff like that. So
Sure.
it's like, oh yeah, do I really want to? But like I said, overall, like I said, I like it. I think it's cool because it did have that vampire lore to it. I thought they did pretty well as far as sticking to the vampire lore. But like I said, overall, is it a movie that I'm gonna pop in all the time? Probably not. So
Sure.
for me, I would give it a solid 7.
7? Sure. No problem, man. Absolutely. So from us, Vampire and Devil, we are officially ranking The Little Vampire at a 7.5 on the obituaries. So we get to have another interesting conversation now. Similar to, not even similar, just like we did with Leprechaun. We have a tie in this showdown and an agreement of 7.5 for both of these movies. Here's the thing. When we did Leprechaun versus Leprechaun 3, we agreed, and I still believe rightfully so, that you always have to lean towards the original. The thing is, we don't have that here. So what do you think? Why don't we start with you? What are you thinking as far as a tiebreaker for this? Do you like strength of overall cast? Do you like lore and storytelling? Have it, ghouls, goblins, spooks, and creeps. It is official in the showdown, the little vampire against she-devil. Victory for the devil. 7.5 per movie, but based off strength of casting. The powerhouse trio of Meryl Streep, Ed Begley Jr., and Roseanne Barr take out the cast of The Little Vampire. So fatality for She-Devil over The Little Vampire. And that is where we're going to call it. That is how we're going to rank it. So thank you guys as always. We'll see you real soon. Horns up, bangs out.
Well, well. Devil seems to be racking up some victories lately in these showdowns. Seems like we might need to call in some reinforcements. Don't bite the hand that feeds you, Devil. We're everywhere.
Dr. Frankenstein used to be a lonely, lonely man, but then he learned how to make friends.
What's up? It's the Devil here again with another self-indulgence movie. Just got done watching The Devil's Advocate with Keanu Reeves, Al Pacino, and sexy Charlize Theron. It's a pretty good movie, portrays the devil pretty well. Is he a liar? Is he a lawyer? Maybe he's both. Is he the father? Is he your friend? He could be all of them. I love to be Charlize Theron's daddy. How about you? This is the part of the show where we honor those who have passed. We honor these three. Screaming Jay Hawkins, he put a spell on you. The 1-year anniversary of Riku Browning's death, the creature from the Black Lagoon. And just recently we lost Carl Weathers, who was in the movie Predator. We honor these three, for those who have passed will not be forgotten.